Hello lovely people, I'm K3N and welcome to week 31 I think it is of our weekly stitch project for 2024. This week I'm going to scratch the surface of the wonderful textile traditions from India. We've talked a while ago about Kantha stitching. I used it as one of my inspirational traditions in Diversity Week. And most of us, when we think of Kantha stitching, if we know anything about it, we just think of that tradition of layering old saris or old worn cloths into multiple layers and then doing parallel running stitches up and down. And when you hear people say Kantha stitching, in general they just mean parallel running stitches going in one direction. That doesn't even begin to describe the wonders of Indian textiles. I'm staying with my friend Chrissy here in England at the moment, and she's travelled extensively in India. And I asked her if she had any books that I could have a look at, and she's got a whole library. So I've selected some just to show you brief snippets, and then we're going to look at a couple of stitches and a technique. But like I say, we barely scratch the surface. It's just to give you a taster, and I may well revisit in future weeks because it's so inspiring. So this book is called, I've checked, I think most of these are available second-hand. I'll try and remember to put a list in the description. This is by Usha Shrikant, and it's called Ethnic Embroidery of India. And on the cover is, we're going to focus on Gujarat. I'll show you on the map. There's a map in here somewhere. Excuse me while I find my page. I've marked them all, but you know. Here we go, and I hope it's not too glary. This is a map of India, a drawn map of India, and this here on the eastern coast is Gujarat, and this very top corner of Gujarat is called Kutch, and it's this area where we're going to focus. Just as a little aside, those of you who have been following along remember Kawandi Week. That came from the Siddhi people who live down here in Karnataka. Just to give you a sense of scale, the coast of Gujarat, this coastline, is nearly 1,000 miles long. So yeah, Gujarat. I just wanted to show you this. If I was in France, I would have all my Torans to show you. I have a few of these wall hangings that go above a doorway. And the one in my studio, if you watch my studio tour, which was months ago, you'll have seen it, is very like this in style, with the mirrors stitched in and this colour palette. So I just wanted to show you that. If I was in France now, I'd show you them all in person, obviously. I have sadly not been to India. I bought them from a shop in Glastonbury here in the UK called Dillyway and Dillyway, which is run by people who regularly go to India. I just quickly wanted to talk, since I mentioned Kantha. Kantha comes from Bengal, which is an area of a small area of India, and it's much more than those parallel running stitches, and we will come back to it at one point. The lotus is a popular motif. There are all these other embroidery patterns that are done and are Kantha, and here's some pictures of actual Kantha. You see here, so the background is the parallel running stitch, teeny tiny, and it can go in every direction, and it can make shapes, circles, squares, triangles, and so on. But then there is embroidery over the surface of it. So yeah, Kantha's much deeper than we might think. And what else have I marked in here to show you? I could have done, you know, an hour-long video easily just showing you through all the books. Yes, I picked this up, this Fulkari of the Punjab. Fulkari means flower craft, and you'll remember, making sure I've got it in the middle, that on Kawandis, on the corners, were the fula, which were the little flowers. So I just thought that was interesting. So that's that book, Ethnic Embroidery of India by Usha Shrikant. This book is by a lady called Morrell, who was actually born in India and is or was a curator of a big textile museum in Calico, the Calico Textile Museum in the capital of Gujarat, whose name now escapes me. Anyway, Chrissy, my friend Chrissy, has met her and visited that museum, and I just wanted to show you some of the things in here. This picture here, which is in black and white, is the oldest known piece of cloth that survives, And this is from either the 15th or the 16th century, produced in Gujarat, and it had the mirrors in. The mirrors are gone, but the impressions are still there. So yeah, I'll say that again. That's from either the 15th or the 16th century, and that's in the Calicut Museum of Textiles in I can't say it, Ahmedabad, which is the capital of Gujarat. But there are records, written records, or engravings and so on, that indicate that the oldest cloth in existence in the Indian subcontinent dates to 300 BC. Here are the more workaday Kantha quilts. Kantha, interestingly, to me at least, means rags, as does borrow. You remember when we looked at Japanese borrow. And these, you see the similarities with borrow. It's just a way of using old cloth, binding it together with stitch and turning it into something serviceable. And it spans all cultures and all textile traditions. There's another Kantha quilt you see there, with embroidery over the top. It's far more to it than just the lines and lines of running stitch. So that's the Techniques of Indian Embroidery by Morrell. Now we're getting into Gujarat itself. This is called Living Traditions of India, and this is written by many people, but it's published by Mapin International. I'm sorry, it's a bit glary. I'll angle it. And I have looked, and it's still available second-hand on a website called Abe Books, A-B-E Books. There are other second-hand bookstores online, I know, worldwide, and you also might find it through your library services. And in here I've marked this photograph I wanted to show you here. This photograph here shows 3 women and a young girl, and the woman in the middle is the grandmother. This is her daughter-in-law, this is her daughter, and this is her granddaughter, and they're all sitting there stitching. And young girls will learn to stitch on a little rectangular piece of cloth, and they'll learn all the stitches on that, and when that's completed that will be folded into 2 and sewn up the sides, and that will become her first purse. But principally from a young age they begin stitching their dowry cloths, their trousseau we would call it, because that demonstrates the skill of the women within the family, and therefore the value of the girl to the to her husband's family. I'm not getting into anything about that whatsoever. I'm just telling you the facts, okay? It's their culture. That was all I marked in there. I just wanted to show you that photo. This book is called Threads of Identity. Oh, and this is about the nomadic Rabaris, who are a tribe of Gujarat, who are nomads. I've marked, I marked this. Can't even fit it all in. This is a toran, which is one of the hangings that goes over a doorway, that is designed to welcome you to the home. The mirrors, and I'll get more into that because we're going to look at mirrors specifically, are called Shisha, which means glass, and they were thought to reflect the evil eye or repel the evil eye, so they were good luck. But also, if you've got something so opulent and beautifully worked hanging over your house, then it says something about your status and your skills, so there's that element to it as well. So that's very, very brief. I'm no expert. This is just from, my reading over the years and so on. So let's get into what we're actually going to do this week. Well, Threads of Identity is by Judy Frater, Frater. But those 4 books that I showed you, I'll put the titles and authors down in the description if you want to look for them. I could have got another 50 books to share with you. Okay, so I thought what we will look at this week is the Shisha, the mirrors, and 2 kinds of chain stitch. The regular chain stitch, which if you've been here a while you'll all know because we used it in Crazy Patchwork Week, for example. But then another very specific form of chain stitch that you see a lot in, certainly in Kutch embroidery and other Indian embroidery, is the open or sometimes called ladder chain stitch. So I'll show you that as well. It gives a very distinctive look. But before we get to that, what you'll need is some cloth. I've got this, a plain cloth, but I couldn't find anything super plain. So this is a piece of my old skirt that I tea-dyed, and I've turned it wrong side up. and a backing cloth. If you want to do this onto single cloth, use a hoop. I don't like to use a hoop, I put a backing cloth, and then I try to be careful with my tension. And then I've got embroidery floss. I've chosen colours that are kind of traditional, so the red, the gold, the green, and less commonly seen, but I just like it alongside the darker blue. So there's the colours I'm going to use. You could also use cotton pearl, you know, or something like that. And then I've got a needle, whichever needle fits comfortably with the thread you've got. I've got the snipper fiskars. I've got a glue stick, which is optional, I'll explain in a minute. And now you need a shisha or a mirror. Now, you probably don't have them. Unsurprisingly, my friend does. So they're going to reflect. And also, I'm not going to use one because it will just be reflecting at you the whole time. I just wanted to show you if you've never seen them. So they come in all different shapes and sizes. It's going to reflect. So there's an oval one. There's a round one. I'll try and angle them. There's some square ones, you know. So they're little. These are, what, 3/4 of an inch across-ish. The other thing they do these days as well, instead of what I'm going to show you, is you can get these little rings which have already got a kind of blanket stitch around them. And then you'd put one of those over your shisha, like so. And then you'd just whip stitch that down onto the cloth. That's kind of the cheats way of doing it. I don't mean cheat, you know what I mean. The other thing you can do is if you don't have shishas and you do have these, they're called, I think they're called paillettes. It's like a big sequin. They've got a little hole in each side, but the hole's irrelevant. You don't need anything with holes in. So you could use those. Sorry, trying not to glare them at you. Basically you can use anything that's flat and firm. You could use a button. You wouldn't sew through the holes necessarily, but you could use buttons. You could use coins. If you had old coins, you could use those. I had a rusty washer somewhere and I've lost it. I mean, you know, I covered it with PVA glue to stop the rust coming off, and I was thinking of using that. But the recycling way of doing it, that I must say Chrissy came up with, not me, is to get, if you eat yogurt or, you know, anything that has a foily type lid to it, this one's very shiny. I had this one here, which was more matte, which was off a large tub of yogurt, and I've just glued it just with normal glue stick down to some thinnish cardboard, and then I've cut out, I just drew around a button, you know, or a cotton reel or something, and then I've cut myself out a little fake shisha. So you could do that. I think that's, I'm just going to check that it's not glaring at you. I think that's not too bad, so I think that's what I'll use. Actually, I'll leave it big. Before I do that, I'm going to do some baste around there. I'm sorry, I meant to do that in advance and I forgot. Whoops. So I'm utterly unprepared, but you know, invisible baste your two bits of cloth together. That's what I should have done already. There's it's a big mess here. It's lovely here where I'm set up, you know, I'm all comfy and everything. Again, apologies if you can hear the road, I can't do anything about that. But it's not the same as being in your own space, is it? Having everything to hand where you know where it is. I keep forgetting where I've put things. So you could, if you want, I'm just going to do my shisha work, my mirror work in the middle, and then I'm going to do the two kinds of chain stitch, just circling out around the edge. So I'm basically just going to do a circle. But if you were more ambitious, or you know, you wanted to do something fancier, you could look up on the internet, or if you've got books or anything like, or, you know, even colouring books or things like that, another kind of motif. If you look up motifs for Kantha embroidery or motifs for Kutch embroidery, Kutch is K-U-T-C-H. If I can find a link or two, I'll put them in the description. And if you wanted to draw something more elaborate, or alternatively, if you didn't want to do a circle, if you just wanted to dot some little shishas about and, you know, do chain stitch in between, it's, you know, you do you as always. I'll get that off for now. So I'm just going to do the invisible baste around the edge, just to hold the two layers together. It's actually Sunday here. I have super fast broadband, luxury, so the videos go up pretty quickly, but my friends have gone out for the day, so, and also I like to put the videos up first thing on a Monday morning, so I thought I'll do it today. Ouch, stabbed myself. And I thought, well, you know, probably the road will be a bit quieter, but apparently not. So I'm just whipping around the edge. Sorry if you're new here, the invisible baste is a tiny back stitch on the front of the work and a longer stitch on the back, and it's a basting stitch that's designed to stay in. And my cloth's not square as usual. Because I tore it and it went wonky, and now I've got a knot. While I'm doing this, I've made some other notes to tell you if I can read my own writing. I don't really want you to be having to look at my writing. Is there anything interesting to tell you? Oh yeah, even though some of the peoples of India are nomadic and travel, and obviously there's influences, especially in latter years, from other countries, apparently it's still obvious to an expert by looking at a piece of textile where it's come from, because they hold so strongly to their own traditions. And although they might share some elements, or, you know, pick up some ideas from other peoples, apparently it's almost like a signature. You know, you can tell by looking at an item which region of India it's from. And textiles are very highly prized, and yeah, as with all these things these days, unfortunately, there are a lot of imitations sold cheaply that, you know, undervalue the work of the original people. And my friend also told me that rather sadly there were people selling off their family heirlooms for very little money, you know, by our standards, which is sad. But there are some wonderful cooperatives now where the women are supported and helped to produce, you know, good work and get paid fairly for it. There's one that's sponsored by Mywa, which is in Vancouver in Canada. Mywa is, if you're into natural dyeing, is an excellent source of information and supplies for that. I think it's called KMVS. I'll look it up and put it in the description. But it's one of the cooperatives where they actually exhibit the work as well. You know, it's not just encouraging women to produce work to sell to tourists. It's actually giving it the artistic value that it deserves by putting it in museums and in exhibitions. Am I all the way around? Yes, I am. Good. I'm all the way around. Right. So I'll end that off and I'll get my little fake yogurt pot Shisha. So I'm just going to put this slap dab in the middle. Apologies for my hands. I said it last time. I have tried to peel all the glue off them. We've been having such fun, and you can see it in my hands. I have scrubbed and scrubbed them until it hurt, but that's as clean as they get, so, you know, I know it doesn't bother you. I don't even know why I'm apologising, just explaining really. So you don't have to do this if you just want to hold it in place with your thumb, but I don't really want to have my thumb in the way so you can't see. I'm just going to put, and this works with a proper Shisha as well, I tried it. Just a little bit of glue on the back. You could use PVA, then you might wait for it to dry a bit longer. It's not holding it on forever, it's just holding it there while you stitch. The stitches will hold it on forever. Thank you, Helen, for my glue stick. So, now, I need to decide what colour I'm going to stitch it down with. I think the green is what I fancy. So I'm going to get a good length, a lazy girl length, and I'm going to use 3 strands. I normally use 2, I know, because you want to put very heavy stitching all the way around the edge, and with 2 strands I would be here forever. So I'm going to use 3. So if you had a pearl cotton, you know, a sort of a an 8 weight. I think a 5 weight would be a bit thick, but you know, the sort of standard pearl cotton, if there is such a thing, that would also work, and it might even work better actually, and you'll see why in a minute. So I'll pull my strands off one at a time, and I'm going to get them in my needle, hopefully. Yes, I am. And pull them so they lay nice and flat. And I'm going to make a knot in the end, because that's the way I roll. And then I'm going to hope that's glued already, and I'm going to go in behind where the little Shisha's sitting and just do a little back stitch. I didn't need to go right in the middle, I could have gone near the edge, but it doesn't matter. And I'm going to do my very best to show you this so that you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to snip that tail off, it's a bit long. It's kind of easier to do than explain, but I'll do my best. Right, so now I'm going to come up right on the edge of the circle. Now if you look at the circle, so you're probably going to have to do quite a lot of looking this week. We're going to stitch a grid over a square grid, so here to here, and you want it to be sort of maybe a quarter of the way across the circle. So here and here and here and here. So I'm going to come up about there, about a quarter of the way in, as close to the Shisha as I can get. I will put my thumb over it in case it's glary. And then you can kind of audition with your thread where you want it to lay. Do you see, do you see? And then shoot back down through there. And this is the foundation round. This is just what holds it in place and gives you somewhere to put the actual stitches. So now I'm going to come up, now I want to go this way. So I'm going to come up about a quarter of a way up that way, behind this stitch. Probably you watching me is better than the words I'm choosing. So I'm going to come up there, turn it, and then audition again just to make sure my thread's in the right place, do you see? And then go down in there. You could, of course, if you thought this was way too big, choose a smaller one. You know, make a smaller one, or choose whatever you're using. And I'm going to do the same thing again. Come up there, turn it, lay it on. Laying it on just gives you a guide, you know, as to where it's going to fall. I expect the women that have stitched literally thousands of them in their lives would look at me with amazement that I'm so rubbish. I'm having to do all this. They can probably do it without looking. So same thing again for the fourth line. And then I'm just going to shoot through to the back. So that's my first grid. And now I want to make another square kind of on point to the first one. You see what I mean? So I'm going to come up about, if you see this gap here, about a third of the way around that gap. And then I'm going to go up that way. These don't have to be even, they're not going to be seen, they're just forming a kind of scaffolding for the next stage. So don't stress over it. So now I'm going to come up behind that. This time I'm going anti-clockwise for some reason. Doesn't really matter. And then like this. So do you see that I'm forming another square over the first square? Like that. And then come up behind it, here, turn it, audition, so it's going to go that way. I'm a bit close to my other square, but it doesn't really matter at all, I hope. Come up behind there, turn, and go across. And then that's my last one. So I hope you can see that that is two squares, vaguely on, one's on a diagonal to the other. And I'm just going to shoot through to the back. and that is the scaffold that we're going to stitch around. So now to start your actual stitching, it's a variation of blanket stitch, so I'm going to come back up just next to where I went down. I'm just going to use the same thread. You could change colour if you wanted to, but I think it blends better. Now it's not a bad idea to use the eye of your needle to thread under, because the point you might split, especially if you're using stranded cotton. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go round the thread from the inside of the circle to the outside. Now in some places that's going to be 2 strands, like here, I hope you can see. And then in other places where I get to these corners, I'll show you here where it's more open, it's going to be 3 strands. But I'll do it slowly and you can rewind and watch as many times as you like. So I've come up, so I'm going from the middle of the circle towards the outside, under those 2 strands of thread in line with where I came out, and pulling it through. Now here you don't want to pull it super tight, you just want to pull it just snug, and you see how it's starting to pull the framework out already. And then the next stage is you keep your thread always away from you, and then you take a tiny stitch just next to where you came out towards the disc, the Shisha, like that. Actually it's more like a cretin stitch than a blanket stitch. And that's your first one. And then you just keep repeating that all the way around. So you come under your strands. Here I have to go under 3. I've got them all, no I haven't. I do think if you've got pearl cotton it will be easier than stranded. But I didn't have it in the right colours. And then keeping my thread away from me, you take that little stitch towards the mirror. You could take a bigger stitch, it would just mean that you had like rays of the sun sticking out. It's just what you like, or whatever's easiest for you. So I come under the strands, however many I think, to keep myself next to the previous stitch. The closer together you can get them, the better the effect is. I'm not going to worry too much. Keep your thread away from you. Take your little stitch towards the mirror and pull it through. And go under your strands. I managed that with the point. From the inside to the outside. Take your little stitch towards the mirror and pull it through. Do you see? So I'm sure that once you start you'll get a rhythm, and it's actually very enjoyable to do, and I can see myself using this much more than I have, in sort of different ways, you know, like I said, the aforementioned rusty washer, you could use it like eyelet stitch, you know, I've shown you eyelet stitch before and we've used that on various things, just as a circular element in your slow stitch, you know, if you're making your journal wraps or your rice bags or whatever else it is people make when they're not making rice bags. It's just another element that you could add, and then you can start looking around the place for things that otherwise you might have thought you couldn't use because they don't have holes in to stitch through. If you do this, you can attach anything you like, basically, as long as it's, you know, reasonably flat. And I just think it's a really lovely effect. And I don't think the yogurt pot version is too bad myself. Obviously with the cardboard in, you couldn't put it in anything you wanted to wash. I guess you could stick it to some recycled plastic, something like that, if you wanted to put it in something you wanted to wash. So I'm just looking, you know, I'm just judging here, do I go once more through the 3 strands, or do I go to the side? And you can put your needle in and look where it will come out, and I think it's the right distance apart from my previous stitch under the 2, so that's what I'm going for. A little bite. I find I have to turn it, but you know, I guess you could do that. I just found that a bit awkward. Probably if I was working on a bigger piece I would find a way not to have to keep turning it. But you know, you find your best way of working. I did that better. I've just stitched a couple this morning before I came on here, just so that I could, you know, remember what I was supposed to be doing. And you quite quickly get into a rhythm with it. And it did make me want to do more. It's funny, I have them hanging. I've got, let me think, I think I've got 4 or 5 Torans in my house, and I've got a couple of other Indian textiles. Because I love going to Dillyways in Glastonbury, and I do believe, if it's the same people that always owned it, Kath, if you're watching, lovely Kath who lives in the vicinity, you can tell me, they are ethical in their purchasing. You know, they don't go buying people's family heirlooms for a pittance, which is important to me, that, you know, that's not what I'm buying. See there, my gap's a little bit big. I'll just squish it along a bit. What you're looking at is covering the mirror. In an ideal world, you'll completely cover the edge of the mirror. I can see mine through here and there. My stitches could be closer together. If you get twisted as you go along, twist. I do it. I don't think I've ever mentioned it. You know, just twist your needle a little bit to untwist your thread. I'm sure most of you do that anyway. If you find your thread getting twisted. Someone mentioned it a little while ago. I think it was Anne. I'm not entirely sure. And I don't know which Anne, because there are lots of Annes. There I'm going under the 3 strands. And I think I'm going to go again under the 3 strands. Oops, and now I've got my thread the wrong side because I'm not concentrating. The thread has to be back in front of, you know, in the way you're working. And I'm pulling it slightly too tight, I can see. That is because when I'm doing running stitch, I pull it tight on purpose, making excuses for myself. So I'm inclined to pull my stitches too tight always. I have to pay attention and just let them lay. But it's very meditative because you have to look while you're working to see how the strands are behaving, you know, the framework, the scaffolding. I think if I was sitting doing this on my own, I would have had these stitches twice as close together as they are. I've got all kinds of projects on the go here. So inspiring being here with a lovely big studio, and so we've done some of the kind of work that my friend does, which is jelly printing and using paint and collage and all kinds of things like that. And I've made a book, and I've also, the other day, we did some eco-printing. We made some bundles of paper and cloth. And I'm twisting the wrong way. Hang on, I'm going to let it hang. If you get confused with which way you're twisting, you can just let it hang and it'll untwist. So we did these big bundles, and we cooked them. She had a pan on her stove in her dye kitchen, in her kitchen, down in her studio kitchen. Oh, Catherine, get your words out. And I said, is this the same one we used when I was here last? She said, no, it's the one we used last year when you were here. We didn't do any eco-printing when you were here last. So it had been sat there for 15 months, indoors, downstairs in the studio, but it didn't smell a bit. And I think it had yucca in, and it had eucalyptus, and it certainly had iron in it, and we'd been doing, I think, printing on paper with a couple of other friends. And that's what we cooked it in. and apparently I'd told her not to throw it away, so she hadn't. But it didn't smell at all. It smelled slightly of eucalyptus. No mould on it, nothing. She did say that for a while she was boiling it up every now and then when she remembered, but she hadn't done that for some time. Anyway, it was fine until I turned the heat on, and then as it got hot, oh dear, it was quite stinky. But it gave beautiful results, so we still haven't thrown it away. So we did a big bundle of mixed cloth and paper, and I'm going to make a journal. Another journal. I'm just working my way around. I think I'm now getting them closer together than I was at the beginning. I'm just going to experiment and see. Oh, I can do it towards me. I'll do it like that. There's another way when I get onto chain stitch, in a minute when I finish my Shisha. They use a lot of chain stitch in embroidery, but they don't always use a needle. They use something called an ari, which is a kind of hook. Sorry, I've now got my thread the wrong side. And they'll do that chain stitch embroidery also on shoes. I think I did that wrong then, but I'm not bothering. What did I do? Sometimes you just have a mental block. I'm going to get that out because it doesn't look right. If you're even watching me anymore and you haven't gone back to whatever you were doing, or you're doing this probably more expertly than me, if you're watching, you'll probably have seen what I did wrong, as I will when I go back to edit. So I don't think I'm going to get round. It does take quite a lot of thread. Oh no, I can't thread my needle. Just snip the end again. I have been trying sometimes not licking the end of the thread because people say you shouldn't. I find sometimes it works better and sometimes it doesn't. So I think it largely depends on the thread. I mean, it's just such a habit of mine to lick the end of the thread. I'm sure a lot of you are the same. Well, it's hard to remember not to. Right, concentrate, Catherine, what are you doing? So you've come up, so now you have to go right down there. That's it. Back in my rhythm. Just lost my rhythm. I'm going to have to end this off and get another bit. So to end off, I'm taking my little bite into the cloth. I'm just going to hop down straight, sort of just next to where I came out, to the back, and then just do it. You see how it looks on the back? And do a little back stitch. Sorry for the motorbike. There's been a music festival in the vicinity, and that's been quite nice to hear, but not very keen on the motorbikes going by. Right, let's try it without licking the end. With 3 strands, it's something of a challenge. Yeah, that worked. You see, it worked that time. I think it just depends how fluffy the thread is. Right, so now I need to come back up basically where I went down, so I'm carrying on as if I never stopped. So I've just come back up in between the last 2 stitches next to the mirror, and on I go with my lazy girl thread that's going to get snagged everywhere. So it will be great fun to see what things you come up with to use as a Shisha, or if you go with the recycled version. And I'm going to definitely go and try and find my rusty washer that I so carefully coated with PVA. And do a kind of eco version, you know what I mean, eco printed version. With, sorry about the motorbike, with you know, a more natural colour palette. Whoopsie. So what else did I write down to tell you? Oh yes, about quilts. Quilts are, well, the quantity and quality of quilts that a traditional household has is very much again related to their status, their standing in the community. And apparently you'll often see quite poor homes, mud huts even, with very little in them, but a great big pile of sumptuous, elaborately embroidered quilts. And there's another cloth that is called, sorry, I've written it down, Daranya, which is a quilt to cover the pile of quilts. And those are especially beautiful because they're what's on show. And one is, like I said, the status, but the other element is that if you've got a great big pile of bedding, you know, it shows that you're able to accommodate visitors. I just think it's so interesting how textiles, sorry about that, how textiles kind of inform and reflect culture. And speaking of reflecting, since we're doing mirrors, sorry, I just realised I was talking about reflecting. I'm nearly back to the beginning. And then, as you come round, if you're spacing, you know, rather than if you're just cramming them in as tight as you can, which is what I would have done. I mean, I don't mind the look of this little, you know, looks like a roundy eye with little short eyelashes. But they really should be closer than that. That should be a complete dense should, you know, don't should yourself. If I wanted it to look more authentic, or as authentic as you can get a bit of foil off a yoghurt pot stuck to a bit of cardboard to look, the stitches would have been crammed much more closely together. But anyway, I think I'm going to change colour. As you come round, you need to just judge your spacing, was what I was going to say. I can get 3 more in there, maybe. One. Or maybe even only 2. I think that's enough. 2. So I've just made my last stitch, and I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to dive down, not through the exact same hole, or you'll just pull your stitch out. I'm just going to go a bit closer to the mirror and shoot through to the back. So there's my little yoghurt pot Shisha mirror. I'll try a big yoghurt pot Shisha mirror. I'll just go behind the mirror thingy bob. I could, of course, have used a proper Shisha, like I said, because there's a great big box of that, and that's not even all of them in that little box. But number one, I was worried about it winking at you, and the other thing, I didn't think it was fair if you didn't have Shisha for me to use something that you didn't have access to. Right, so I think I'm going to go with gold next, or red. I'm going to go with gold. Sorry for all of you who are shouting red. This is actually Chrissy's, because I didn't have anything gold enough with me. So I pinched it, or I didn't pinch it. She said I could use it. But it's tied up funny, so I hope I don't make a big mess of it. I'll give it back to her in a big tangle. Right, let's get some off. It's a lovely colour of gold. It's not even been tea dyed. Right. Oh, sorry about, I hope that's not been glaring at you the whole time. Oh, I can't do anything about it now. So now I'm going to do just some normal chain stitch next, I think. Got a super lazy girl thread. But I'm still, I think, I don't know, I'm still going to use 3 strands, because I think when you look at authentic Indian textiles in real life, which I have had the, you know, like I said, I've got some, it is quite thick, the embroidery, it's quite heavy, and some pieces you don't see the backing at all. It's just a complete solid surface of embroidery. So although I'm not copying, you know, we're always only inspired by, that's all we can be. I think I'm going to go for 3 strands and try and get that heavier look. Right, chain stitch. So I'm just going to do regular chain stitch with this super long bit of thread. I'm going to tie a knot in the end. If you want to start with a back stitch and you don't think you should put knots in your embroidery, you do you. I'm going to go as close to those little eyelashes, let's call them, as I can. So chain stitch. You come through, you keep your thread under your needle, you go in basically nearly the same hole you came out of, you go forward however long you want your chain stitches to be, and you keep your thread under the needle and you pull through like that, and then you go back in into the chain. Don't come outside the chain, that's a lazy daisy. Go back into the chain, nearly the same place you came out, and repeat. Thread around the needle, pull through. And again, don't pull your stitches too tight, I'm talking to myself. Just let them lay nice and plump on the surface. Whoopsie. What have I done now? I've come through the loop the wrong way. Have I? Yes. And don't do what I just did. I went down through the loop instead of up. Got it twisted. That's it. I'm just going to do that all the way around the circle. You'll also see different kind of animal motifs used in embroidery. So peacocks, lions, horses, birds of all different kinds, but drawn in a kind of folk arty way. And that's another thing that's recognisable, because, well, there's one of 2 things happen. Either the people draw their own designs, or they take them and have them block printed on the cloth with a blue dye, so that they can stitch over them. And India has been renowned for centuries for natural dyeing. I mean, these days I don't think much of it goes on. A lot of it's now synthetic. But because of the variation of climates and, you know, landscapes to grow different plants in, and certainly they have indigo, and they have myrobalan, or myraba. I can't even say it. It's kind of a yellow ochre colour it gives anyway. But yeah, so all of those, obviously, if you see textiles that are from kind of the mid-19th century back, they're naturally dyed. And I have seen textiles, very, very old textiles. I've been to Aubusson in France, where they're famous for woolen carpets. And I've seen carpets there that are thousands of years old. All naturally dyed, still bright colours. I'm just working my way around with my chain stitch. And you could, if you wanted to, like I said, if you don't want to just do circles, you could draw simple shapes yourself directly onto the cloth, leaf shapes or heart shapes or squares, you know, geometric shapes, any kind of shape you like. And I just draw in general with a regular pencil. And then you can fill them in with chain stitch, and that will give you that look, that sort of traditional look. And you can either just, you know, chain stitch up and down. It would depend on the shape itself what you chose to do. Right, for a leaf, for example, you could draw a line up the middle and then chain stitch up and down to the line to give the impression of the vein up the middle. And for quite a big leaf, I would say do quite big designs. I'm quite liking my little wheel. And then as you start coming back round to the beginning, it's the same if you're running stitch, you know, doing a running stitch circle, which I often do. You have to start thinking about your length of stitch if it's important to you that they're all, you know, vaguely the same length. I'm not there yet, I need to do a couple more. So that you can then slightly adjust your stitch length to fit in however many you think. I'll do one more and then I'll have a look. I don't want you there, stray thread. So if I look now, I think I can get 1, 2, 3. I can squeeze 3 more in there. And then I'll show you what to do when I get back to the beginning so it looks continuous. 2. Slightly tighter. I left that slightly too loose. Now for my last one, I come up just literally behind the first one. Make the stitch as normal. And then I go down, you're just couching that loop down of that last stitch, and I just go down between the 2 legs of the first stitch. Like that, and then it's virtually impossible to see where the beginning and the end is. So that's my little chain stitch round. Just end it off on the back. You could just keep going round and round in the same colour. You could change colour, you know, you could really play with it. And really cram them in together as tightly as you can. But I'm going to do, I'm going to change colour. I think I'm going to go for the red now. It's looking a bit Christmassy, but you know, not really. So now I'm going to do some ladder chain stitch or open chain stitch, whatever you want to call it. I think ladder chain stitch is the most descriptive, you'll see in a minute. Now this is a little bit, not tricky. Well, there are a couple of steps that are important with controlling your loops, but I think the effect is worth the bother if you've never done it before. So I shall do my level best to make sure you can see clearly what I'm doing. I'm still with my 3 strands. I'm just wrangling them into place. I'm trying to thread them with my needle. I need to work with 3 strands more often apparently so that I get better at threading. There we go. And I'm going to actually draw myself a little guideline, because you stitch ladder chain stitch on along 2 parallel lines. So I could do one of two things. I could either leave a gap and then draw 2 parallel lines, but I think I'll keep my inner chain stitch as my inner guideline. So I'm going to go about 1/4 inch away and just draw just with a normal pencil. If you've got those fancy cloth marking Frixions and blue pens and what have you, you can use one of those if you want to. But a normal pencil will just stay long enough for me to complete the stitch, and then it won't be visible afterwards. So I'm just working my way around just by eye. Right to the beginning. There we go. I'm going to come up on the inside edge of the line I just drew. And then I'm going to come down on the outside edge across from where I came out, and then I'm going to angle my needle with I get my thread out of the way to come up about 3/16 of an inch or so. It doesn't matter, you know, consistency I suppose is the important thing. Play with the gap and see what you like. So I've come up just in front of where I came out over here, and I've got this thread looped under my needle, and then you pull but not all the way through, leave a loop, and then you need to go down again on the outside edge across from where you've now come out, and then you make that same movement. You come up again, hope I'm in frame and everything, in front of where you're coming out there, and then get your thread, put it under your needle, and then pull that loop up. And then pull through, but not all the way through, leave a loop. And then if you still think that thread, that previous stitch isn't laying flat enough, you can just adjust by pulling the tail that's coming out of the cloth. And it's up to you how big you leave this loop, how handy you think it is. I've been pulling it up kind of like that. So then you go down into the loop onto the opposite line, come forward, get this thread, snug up, put it under the needle, pull through, leave a loop, go in on the outside line, come up on the inside line, and because I'm doing a circle, the gaps on the outside circle have to be slightly wider than on the inside because it's, you know, it's bigger. And so then I'm going to snug up, tuck it under my needle and pull through, not all the way through, and you get this really cool ladder effect. So in I go on the outside edge, up I come on the inside edge, snug up, tuck around the needle, under the needle, sorry, snug up slightly more and pull through. Outside edge, inside edge, snug up, under the needle, pull through. Not all the way through. It's very tempting to pull all the way through. And that's it, that's the ladder chain stitch. But I think the trick is to get hold of this thread, the one that's coming out of the cloth, and snug it up and then put it under the needle. That I think is the trick, for me at least. Maybe it's different for you. And also don't forget to go through your loop. You see the loop's laying there, I'm going down through the loop, coming forward on the inner line, and then snugging up, and then putting it around the needle. And then I know that stitch behaving itself before I move on to the next one, and not getting ahead of myself. Snug, under, pull. And again, if you've never done this stitch before and you think, oh my, that's super complicated, just try it. and see if you'll find a rhythm, and then you'll like it or you won't. And if you don't, there's plenty of other stitches. You can just do the regular chain stitch. I've seen whole pieces of work of Indian textiles done only with the regular chain stitch and running stitch. So, but I just wanted to show you this because I think it's got a very distinctive look. It's quite hard to do it away from me. I'm always making excuses for myself, aren't I? Snug under, pull. Snug under, pull. Do you see? It's like a wheel. I'll get my big fat thumb out of the way in a minute and show you properly. But for me, the main pitfall is pulling right through before you've gone down, through the previous loop, because you think you're doing a rig and then not putting your loop through your needle. Apparently I need to concentrate still. It's not a stitch that's second nature to me. I did think about doing a motif, a traditional motif, but it's not long ago since we did mandala. It's only 2 weeks ago, and it would have been, well, it may or may not have been a plique. There is a plique in Indian textiles. There is a tradition of using a plique, but if I'd picked a motif, it would have been something like the lotus flower, which is very similar to a mandala. So I just thought it was a bit close, but it seemed too good a chance to miss that I'm here at Chrissy's with this wonderful library of books to leave it till later. So that's why I'm doing a circle. Plus I like circles. Right, so I'm coming back round to the beginning. So again, I need to have a little look and see. I think I can fit 2 more in there. Done it again. Picked up my loop. I'll fit 1 more in between there. Snug under the needle, pull through, and then go through the loop, and then I'm going to come out on the leg where I started, on the inner leg. Come on, there we go. And same thing again, go under and pull it up. And now I need to take a little couching stitch over there just to trap that loop down, like that. I'm not sure this is the proper way to do it. This is just the way that I came up with. And I'm going to come back up through the other leg and hope I can snug that up, which of course now I can't. Yes, I can. Snug that up and then just trap that loop with a little couching stitch, like that. And now you can't see where I began and ended. There we go. And finish off on the back. So that's my little basic one with showing you how to attach the mirror and the 2 types of stitches. I'm going to go away and do some more work on this. I'm sorry, I know I don't normally do that, but and then I'll be back to show you it finished at the end. Okay, I've just spent 2 or 3 hours in the sun doing all that extra stitching. I think on reflection, sorry, I did not mean to make a pun. On reflection, I would have done a smaller mirror. I think it's a bit big. My thought was that you'd be able to see better. I'm not sure it helped, but anyway, I'm very happy with the stitching though. So after I did the normal chain stitch and the ladder chain stitch in red, I then did 3 more rows of normal chain stitch in gold. Then I did ladder chain in green, and then 2 rows of normal in the blue, a row of ladder in the gold, and then back to the red for a final round of normal chain stitch. So yeah, I think I'm going to go and experiment with smaller mirrors. I think that's just a bit big, but anyway, it is what it is. I've got my book here. I shall sew it in. Last week I forgot to date and sign, so I've done that. And nobody noticed, nobody said anything. I got away with it. Anyway, so which way? I think we'll do it that way because it's slightly longer. Just going to stitch, I think I'm going to stitch it along the edge of the page. It's quite thin paper, this. And I'll tell you what I'm going to write. So I hope you enjoy it. Like I said, I will definitely be revisiting Indian textiles. Don't know when. Don't know what we're doing next week. It'll be August next week. Unbelievable. I don't know where the year's going. It's a tiny bit of cream thread that happened to be in this needle. I hope it's enough. I've been sewing a lot of cloth to paper. My friend who I'm staying with is also a keen bookmaker. Her books are a completely different style to mine. So we've been sharing techniques and ideas and things. Yeah, and I've been doing a lot of stitching on paper and sewing cloth to paper. There, that was just long enough. I might show the books I'm making, or when I've made them, over on my Ko-fi page. If those of you who support me there will get to see those. Okay, there we go. So what I thought I would write is just the title of one of those books, because it seemed to fit with the idea of the embroidery as being very specific to the different groups of people, and how it's recognisable, and how it kind of tells of the skills and the, I don't like to say the value of, the skills and the abilities of the women that make them. And that is just those three words, threads of identity. So I'm going to write that over here. Threads of identity. And then I'm going to date. We are the 29th. A7, we're not, I nearly put 08, 07, 24, K3N Kiss. So that's this week's Shisha, mirror work, normal chain stitch, unopened chain stitch, to honour the work of the Kutch people of the Gujarat in India. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to you joining me next time for more Cloth Tales. Bye bye.